causes and prevention of childhood disabilities. Right. So we have a lot of audience coming in already, and we're slightly running late. So if you, I'd like to take you to take over. Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Start, Dr. Rajni.
Okay. So, good morning, everybody. I welcome all the parents to this forum, and today I'll be discussing on causes and prevention of childhood disability. This is a very important aspect in children, and we see a lot of rising trend of childhood disability these days. And it is very important for us to understand that why these disabilities are happening and what can we do as a parent, as a community, as a good citizen of the country, that how can we prevent it. So it is very important that we don't keep on increasing the burden of the disease, and we should actually stop and kind of help in the decreasing trend of the disease. So let's talk about the etiologies, and then I'll speak something on the prevention of the childhood disability. So I'll give you a basic idea of disability. We'll discuss about the burden of the disease, how common it is in India and elsewhere, and what are the categories of disabilities in which we categorize, what are the causes, and we'll discuss this in detail, and we'll speak something about the prevention of the disease. Today I'll not discuss that how do we investigate, what are the treatment. This is not the scope of the presentation. We will just focus on that why this is happening and what can we do as a parent, as a doctor, to prevent this, and we should actually try to have a decreasing trend of this in future as well. So, what is disability? It is an umbrella term. It is a blanket term which includes the impairment and basically the loss of abnormality, the restriction of the ability to perform a function, and as well it involves it limits the participation also. So, what happens here, as we see in this diagram, there is a disease onset process, and after that we can see some amount of impairment. Impairment is the loss or abnormality of physiological or psychological or anatomical structure. Basically, it can be a physical disability or it can be just a mental, behavioral, or cognitive impairment. So, basically, the child has a disease pathology, not only physical, can have also a mental thing. And then we have the sign and symptom developing up. And because of that abnormality, the child is not able to perform the activities of daily living or the higher functioning abilities. That term is specifically called as disability. And what will happen because of the disability, child is not able to participate in uh, the term of long term functioning. It limits or prevents the full functioning, the full functional outcome of the child in the school, in society, and in long life as well. So, anatomical disturbance, that is impairment. The disability is the restriction which the child is not able to do, and because of that, the child is cut out from the society. That is the handicap. Talking about the burden of the disease, this is an emerging global health priority, because over the time we have seen that there is an increasing trend. Not because that children are having increasing number of disease disabilities or increasing number of disease predisposition. It is because of the increased diagnostic and treatment modalities which are available. So we are able to pick up the children at a very early stage, and also at times we are able to pick up when the child is still inside the mother's womb. That is why we are able to, there is a rising trend. And the other reason for this rising trend is that we are able to report this nowadays, since the level of education is increasing, the level of empowerment, the level of enlightenment of the parents have been increasing. They are able to report to the medical facility earlier. So because of that, there is a apparent increase, there is a pseudo increase in the last 30 years which we have been seeing it. In many countries, it is around 4 to 6.5% in worldwide, that is in many countries. But this is a very recent data. Indian data, it is a multi-centric study in 5 different countries, and we saw that the data shows from 2 to 6 years of age, it was 2.9 to 18.7% for the 7 neurodevelopmental disorders. And on an average, a pooled estimate was 9.2%, which is a very high. So 9.2% is high for all the children between 2 to 6 years of age. And when the children have increased in age, like 6 to 9 years, the percentage as all the more increases. So that means there are multiple causes which occurs even after when the child is birth to cause lot of disabilities. So in the growing age, children have a high percentage of having chances of having a disability. 1 in 8, this is a very big number. So 1 in 8 children can have neurodevelopmental disability in India from the age group of 2 to 9 years. That's what this result shows. So we should be very much cautious. We must try to look upon that we do not end up having a children with any of these problems. At least we should try to recognize the preventable ones. So let's discuss about the categories. Categories, we have 4 broad categories. One is motor or physical. Motor is the physical part, the body part. It can be in one part of the body or it can be generalized part of the body which has a disability. And what about cognitive? Cognitive is a higher mental functioning of the individual. So the thinking process, the learning process, the memory process, the intelligence, and how does the child behave. All these aspects come in the cognitive part of the children. So cognitive or intellectual dysfunctioning. What about neurobehavioral? Behavioral itself suggests that something about the behavior of the child. The child is otherwise fine, has a normal IQ, normal intelligence, and the child might have problems in the school in terms of the behavior, in terms of coping up, in terms of adjustment, and also communication to the other peer group members. So that is neurobehavioral problems. That also forms a very major part of childhood disability these days. Because of the increased recognition, we are able to report it better. And sensory impairment. We have our 5 basic senses, all of us know, and out of which the hearing and vision plays a very important role. In the nervous system, there is an afferent pathway that the impulses will gather the impulses, it goes up to the brain and it goes out. So, what are the 2 channels by which the child will learn? One is vision, that is, he'll learn a lot of things by seeing it, and the other thing is hearing. If the child will not hear, the child will not be able to speak. So these are the 2 major, like hearing and vision are the 2 major sensory organs which actually helps a child to grow, to have his full potential. So these are the 4 major categories in which we divide a child with disability. In motor, it can be cerebral palsy. As we know that cerebral palsy is a problem in which the child has acquired a brain injury while the child is still developing. So either it can be in utero, it can be during the birth, it can be after birth, when the child's brain is still maturing, a slowly growing, maturing brain having an insult, by whatever reasons, the child will develop a cerebral palsy. So it has to develop in the growing age. One thing is that. The other thing is it is a permanent injury. So it stays, it's a static injury. It will not increase, it will not decrease, and it is not a, uh, it will not happen in the later half of the life. It will happen in the early part of the life. It will lead to the physical impairment of the child. Child will have some amount of tone problems. Child will have abnormal stiffness or abnormal looseness of the body. Child can have abnormal movement of the body. So any child having a difficulty in maintaining a posture or a particular tone or having abnormal movement of the body due to the brain injury, the term is a cerebral palsy. And we should remember it's a growing brain injury, which is permanent. So, what about neuromotor impairment? Neuromotor impairment means the problem is there in the muscles or nerves or in the system which is outside the central nervous system. We have a central nervous system in the brain and we have a peripheral nervous system. In peripheral nervous system, we have the nerves, we have the muscles. So, any injury, any problem, genetic or hereditary or otherwise, in the nervous system or muscular system is known as neuromuscular impairment. As in the diagram, I have shown the muscular dystrophy child having calf hypertrophy. That is a sign which shows that the child's muscles are not well. They are dystrophic muscles. So they can have a motor problem. They can have physical disability, again amounting towards a childhood disability. Now, what about trauma? If a child has had an accident or a child has a brain injury or some kind of accident having a spinal injury, the child will again have some amount of disability, and that can happen in the later half of the life also. that will again amount towards the motor or physical disability. Any accidents, if the child has met through, then the child will have a physical disability. Any kind of brain infections, we know about the meningitis, that is the infection of the brain meninges. Any amount of brain encephalitis, so any infection of the brain, or stroke is a kind of clot formation inside the brain, a part of the vessel getting blocked and the brain injury happening. So stroke, infection, trauma, accidents, these are all the affliction of the brain which can happen after the child is born. So they will also again lead to motor injury. Neurobehavioral disorder, I've just given an idea that these are the three major groups in which we see the children these days. One is autism, that is a very prevalent kind of disease, prevalent kind of disorder, not a disease, we can't say that's a disease. And disorder which says that the child has difficulty in communication. So child's intelligence is fine, child will be able to perform the school activities, the learning ability, the memory, everything should be fine, but the child have a problem in communication, and the child will have some amount of repetitive behavior, as well as child will might have some amount of sensory issues. So this is an amalgam, this is a total amalgam having multiple core features, and after excluding all the organic causes, we label the child to have a autistic behavior child, a child with autistic spectrum disorder. So that is a behavioral problem. There will be no physical disability. The child's intelligence is also fine. So this is about communication. The other problem is ADHD. ADHD is again a special problem in children which leads to a poor scholastic performance. The child might have a poor peer group relationship. Child might have difficulty in concentration. The child will have inattention, and he might have an impulsive behavior that doesn't lead, that doesn't that doesn't help the child to grow to his full potential. So that is again a important neurobehavioral disorder. Learning disability has multiple parts as shown in this tree. The child will have auditory processing disorder or a dyslexia or dysgraphia. Dysgraphia is the geometric diagrams. The child will not be able to perceive the geometric diagrams the same way as they are. So he will have a difficulty in performing those kind of subject problems in the school. Dyscalculia, a child might have the difficulty in concentration in maths. So he will be very difficult in solving the simple or the complex mathematical problems. So all these problems comes under a blanket term of learning disability. So learning disability also doesn't help the child to reach to his maximum potential, and his schooling years will have some amount of problems in school. So again, an important cause of childhood disability, and this is a very under recognized, and gradually people are kind of knowing it, and they are uh, becoming aware about this disability, and that is why it is getting increasingly recognized. Sensory impairment, I already discussed that these are the two major areas which we always screen on a child having a disability where we suspect a brain injury or a kind of central nervous system injury. We try to concentrate on the vision, we try to screen the hearing. Even if there is no leading complaint, we do screen for the vision and hearing part. Vision affection, the child can have only isolated vision problem as well, and that will also lead to any kind of impaired participation of the child, that is the term disability. So child can have a vitamin A deficiency leading to the corneal problems, and child will have a difficulty in seeing. So that is a isolated vision problem, again a childhood disability. Oxygen problem is because I'm telling a child who is a premature child and has received oxygen in the early neonatal period might have some amount of ROP, that is a retina of prematurity. So the child might have a problem in the later half in terms of vision. Any corneal injury, any accidents or corneal injury in which the cornea is affected, so child will have a problem in the vision. Any kind of infection, a congenital infection can also cause, or a tubercular infection can also cause some amount of vision injury. Any retinal problems, retina is a main part, is a where the retinal pigments and all is there. So it is very important part where which affects, which if got affected leads to difficulty in vision. Hearing again can be because of some infections. Any congenital infection can also lead to hearing problems. Any brain infection like meningitis or encephalitis in small age group children can lead to hearing problems. Drugs, if the child has received some, there are 3 4 drugs which are very much potent to cause some amount of hearing problems. Isolated hearing problems in children are common, can be due to infections, can be due to drugs, can be due to some kind of ear malformations. There is only the ear cochlear malformations that can lead to isolated hearing problems. It can be genetic as well. Yes, there can be families who can have just generations having hearing problems. So vision problem isolated, isolation hearing problems can also lead to a difficulty in coping up with the child. Let's talk about the cognitive and the intellectual part. There are two terms. One is global developmental delay and one is intellectual disability. So when do we say and how do we say? Let's discuss. Global developmental delay. A child's development includes multiple domains. One is gross motor. Motor means all depending upon the physical ability of the child. Gross motor is the child sitting, the child standing, walking. All these features of the child is mainly involved in the gross motor. Fine motor is hand activities, able to draw, able to put up the blocks together. So gross motor and fine motor activities we club together as a first domain. Speech and language. So understanding what is there is a part of speech, and languages is a part of language, and speech is when the child expresses it. So expressive speech. So speech and language is clubbed together. Cognition is understanding. Understanding that age appropriate understanding and learning things, the memory part comes under the cognition. Personal and social development and the activities of daily living is again a very important domain which tells us that the child has a normal development. So when we club this in any of these 5 domains, out of these 5 domains, if child has problems in 2 or more developmental domains, then the child might have a global developmental delay. And these delay should be significant. This is a mathematical term like 2 or more standard deviation, but overall, if the child has significant problem in 2 or more domains out of this 5, then the child has a global developmental delay. With age, the child might improve in one domain and child might lag in one domain. So that will again give us an idea that what problem does the child have. Yeah, so this was global developmental delay. Again, I have done global developmental delay. So what about disabilities? How do they present? They can present antenatally also. Yes, when the mother is pregnant and all these 9 months, when the mother is being screened, she has been screened antenatally for any kind of physical abnormalities, any kind of birth defects, which we are able to understand by the ultrasounds or other genetic tests in those 9 month period. It can also present after birth in the first year of life with presenting with the motor problems in which the child is not able to sit or not able to stand. Our child can have later severe learning disabilities. Child is not able to pick up. Child's socio-cognitive milestones are not normal, and in the school the child will have in the later age of the child, like by the 3 years, 4 years, when the child goes to school, then these kind of learning disabilities or the behavioral problems come up. And the child can also have some amount of child disability after this early years, after 3 years or 4 years, when the child meets with accident or trauma or other kind of acquired injuries. So this picture shows that when the child is still inside, we can able to pick up by the ultrasound that the brain has some malformation. So this is presentation of a disability in the antenatal period. Autistic child and the child with a physical disability in this last picture. This is an intellectual disability which I was speaking about. Intellectual disability is deficit in intellectual functioning and adaptive functioning. There are two functionings. One is about the higher mental functions. What are the functions of that? That abstract thinking, problem solving behavior, the judgment, the academic learning, learning from the experience. These all are assessed by a particular test which is called IQ test. Usually clinical psychologists are able to perform this test and They'll see the child, they'll perform a set of questionnaire based examinations, and they'll be able to tell you what is the overall IQ of the child. So that is about the intellectual functioning of the child. What about the adaptive functioning? Adaptive functioning is when there is a failure to meet the developmental or socio-cultural standard for personal independence and social responsibility, limited functioning in one or more activities of daily life. So all the social problems that the child is not able to become a personally independent child, and all the household activities, the activities of daily living will come in this adaptive functioning. So a child might have the problem in adaptive functioning, so will have the problem also in intellectual functioning. But a child who has a problem in intellectual function can be okay in adaptive functioning. So in intellectual disability, it can be deficient in any one of these or both, and the onset should be in the developmental period. So we label as the child having intellectual disability. The normal course which we follow is in a less than 5-year-old child. We usually coin the term as the global developmental delay. And intellectual disability term is coined when the child is more than 5 years of age. So let's come to the causes of the childhood disability. Very important part. We'll discuss in different segments that when and how these problems can come. There are three major timings when this injury can happen to the child. One is prenatal, that is prior to the birth of the child. Those 9 months are crucial and very important when the child is developing inside the mother's womb. The second is a perinatal. Natal is related to birth, so perinatal is around the birth, just when the birth process is starting and the birth part, that is a perinatal period. What about postnatal? That is after the birth has taken place and in the early neonatal period, that is 0 to 28 days, and then thereafter. So postnatal is after birth. So in these three domains, these are the percentage which I have given. Most important is prenatal. That is 80% of the causes, 80% of the problems occur when the child is still inside the mother's womb. It is not the perinatal. What we think that बच्चे के पैदा होने में दिक्कत हो गई. So that is a very lesser part, just the 10%. The major part is this one. So if we fix up this one, if we are able to do something for this prenatal part, we are able to stop it. We are able to prevent this childhood disability to happen. So this percentage is important, and we should be always trying to have a good control over it. So what do we do? First thing is genetic factors. In children, the prenatal factors are decided by the genetics component. And there is a metabolic component to it also. Metabolic is the inherited disorders of metabolism. All your chemical balance, all your enzymes, catalyst, catabolism, which is happening inside the body, is regulated by enzymes. Enzymes are regulated again by genetics. So these are the fine tuning problems which can present in the prenatal period. They'll give you some signs so that people are able to know that yes, this is a problem which the child has. Malformations is abnormal formation of any organ of the body. Can be brain, can be other parts of the body. Nutrition is again very important. Iodine is in certain areas of India and otherwise, the topography, the geographic location can have low iodine. So that's why the government has started way back fortifying the salt with iodine, so that we take salt in our daily intake, and that's how we maintain our iodine levels. So if the iodine is low in mother's diet, the child will be having some amount of developmental problems, that is congenital hypothyroidism, cretinism child. Iron. So if the mother is anemic, if the mother is not healthy, the mother has anemia, the child will be again not healthy. There are chances that the child will be having a low birth weight. Maternal factors, that is age factor, the birth gap, the chronic diseases. If the mother is unwell, mother has some amount of like chronic diseases, any heart disease or diabetes or thyroidism, then there are high chances the child might develop some amount of disability. So that is why those 9 months are very crucial, and there is a norm that they are screened. They are high risk mothers. They are screened regularly by the doctors to just find out that the baby is developing well. Toxins. One is alcohol, which is very rampant in the developed countries, not more so in our country. The other toxin is lead, heavy metals. If the mother stays in an area in which there is a kind of water having lot of heavy metals, that can affect the development of the child. So that is again important. Teratogens, other drugs. If the mother for her illness is on some amount of some kind of drug which can lead to problems in the children, then again it should be discussed with the doctor that are all the drugs which the mother taking safe during the pregnancy or not. Infections. This torch is the kind of 5 infections which are very common when the mother, basically it's common in all the ladies also, but it can affect the development of the child, the brain development, the other organ part of the development. That is that during the pregnancy period we want the mother to be healthy and not acquiring these infections. Toxoplasmosis, O is for others, rubella, CMV, that is cytomegalovirus virus, and other is herpes. And radiation, if the mother has some kind of profession when the where the mother gets exposed regularly to some radiations, then again that is a that has a teratogenic potential. That is the child's development might be affected. So we should take care of all these factors. These are the extrinsic factors. The above three are the intrinsic factors. That these factors are related to the genes, or otherwise in that particular pregnancy the malformations might be there. So perinatal factors and the postnatal factors I'll discuss again in the subsequent slides. Again, important is undetermined factors. There are certain factors which are undetermined. So familial, either there are some familial undetermined factors which the doctors are not able to figure out that why does the repeated generations have this kind of disability or these problems, or non-familial factors. It is important to know about what is the congenital disorder and what is a genetic disorder. I've seen a lot of parents asking me the question ki, is all the problem genetic? And suppose I counsel about the genetic problems, they'll ask what about the congenital disorders. So congenital disorders are the disorders which are present during the birth, or it can be identified antenatally or sometime in the infancy, like a hearing defect. If a child is getting diagnosed at the later infancy or maybe between 1 to 2 years of age, then that again is a congenital disorder. So it should be present in the early age of the life. Whereas genetic disorder, it can be present in the later half of the life also. A man who is a 60-year-old old man can develop some problem neurologically or otherwise which is related to his genes. So that is a genetic disorder present in any age of the any age of the man or life, and it is transmitted through generation. That means the generation which is above can also transmit to them, and a person who doesn't have any family history of having such a disease can also transmit to their next generation. So that person can be the first person in the family having this disorder. These are called the de novo mutations, or the person heading the tree, and in the next subsequent generations the this disease can be transmitted. So hereditary is transmitting to the generation. Sorry. Congenital disorders need not be genetic always. They can have environmental factors, they can have infections, as I have told. That all the congenital infections, the torch infections, they can lead to congenital disorders. The environmental factors is the toxins, the drugs, and the alcohol thing which I spoke about. All these environmental factors are another important cause of causing these congenital disorders. So, what are the three important congenital disorders in India? One is congenital heart disease. Yes, this is very common. And the other thing is neural tube defect. Neural tube is a tube when the child is born. Between 0 to 12 weeks of the child, when the child is born, the brain is developing. It starts as a pole, as a tube like thing, and then gradually the brain and the spinal cord develops. So during that time, the child can have a neural tube defect. Down syndrome is a chromosomal disorder, that is trisomy 21. That is also the most common chromosomal disorder which we encounter in our country, and they can present with isolated developmental delay or intellectual disability. The other thing is genetic disorders, which I have spoken about. These are the Fragile X syndrome or the Tay Sachs disease, and they are inherited through parents and can occur de novo. So this is a slide showing the genetic factors. It is a chromosomal disorder. We have 22 pairs of chromosomes, and one is X and one is Y. 21. This is chromosome 21. These are normally in a pair. When it is three, like three sets of chromosomes, that is triploidy. So trisomy, we see as trisomy. Trisomy 21 is can feature with certain physical features which are the doctors can be identify them as a mongoloid facies, and there are certain physical features basically to identify that the child might have a Down syndrome. And final diagnosis is by a karyotyping. This is a karyotyping plate showing this. This is the most common chromosomal disorder in children which we encounter in our country. The other one is a Fragile X syndrome in male boy. This is very common after Down syndrome that the child can present with isolated intellectual disability. Birth defects, cleft lip, cleft palate, cleft foot. These are the pointers for the neural tube defect. The child can have encephalocele, can have anencephaly, can have some amount of spinal dysraphism. Can you see the difference in the head size? Head size is apparently very small, and here the head size is apparently very large. So these are the markers for the congenital infections. This first one is the Zika virus. Because of the congenital Zika virus, the child can have microcephaly. Other infections also, like the torch infections I said, can have microcephaly. The HIV infection in the mother can have, the child can present with microcephaly. Hydrocephalus, usually toxoplasmosis present with hydrocephalus, and they need surgery urgently during that time. So abnormal head size again a marker of some kind of congenital infections commonly. These are the images which shows that some amount of brain malformations. The brain, obviously there is no symmetry here. We can see that one part of the brain there is a cleft over there. This is a calcification in the brain. Alcohol not common in our country, but yes, it's an important cause since there is a lot of modernization and westernization occurring in some part of the country. So this is again coming up as a main cause that the alcohol should be restricted during the pregnancy time, because it can lead to the increase in the chance of miscarriage. Child can have stillbirth, can have low birth weight, can have other malformations, and with the growth of the child is stopped, and can have a heart disease also with the alcohol. This is with the iodine, the child can be creatine. You can see the macroplosia and the child who's totally hypotonic and protruded abdomen, protruded umbilicus. These are certain markers which shows that the child has hypothyroidism. And unless until we supplement the thyroxine hormone to them externally, child will not develop their normal potential. So again, coming back to the basic slide, we have discussed the prenatal causes. Let's discuss the perinatal causes. Perinatal causes, which is the 10%. We all know about perinatal asphyxia is brain में oxygen की कमी हो जाना. That is commonly known as hypoxia. So during the delivery process, most of the children are said that ये ठीक से रोया नहीं था, so brain में oxygen नहीं पहुंची. Yes, that is an important cause, but not the major cause. And that can be prevented if the institutional deliveries are happening, then that can be prevented. And the timely monitoring of the child during that birth process, how is the child growing, how is the fetus, is there any chance of fetal distress, then that process can be actually avoided. Prematurity is because of multiple reasons. As I said, the mother's nutrition decides, the environmental factors decide about the mother's well-being, the hypertension, the otherwise the hypothyroidism status, the hypertension, that is a PIH, pregnancy induced hypertension, will also lead to prematurity. If the child has twin pregnancy, there can be chance of prematurity. So there are multiple factors which leads to prematurity. Prematurity itself, without having other risk factors, child can have a childhood disability. Like a child who is extremely premature can have physical disability. If not, child can have some problems in the minute processing of the brain, the problem solving behavior, some amount of intelligence problems. Child can also have some amount of ADHD, like hyperactivity or poor concentration in the school. So prematurity itself, without having other risk factors, can have some amount of maybe severe, maybe mild, some amount of problems, which can be labeled as childhood disability. So child's infection during that time, during the birth process, if the child has acquired some infection, then again the child might have some problems. Stroke in the child, intraventricular hemorrhage. A premature child is also prone to have intraventricular hemorrhage. Hypoglycemia is very important. A child having a problem of sugar during the birth process, having low sugar, so that directly affects the brain. There are certain areas in the brain which needs a lot of glucose during the time the child is growing. If there is a certain sugar cutoff in those areas are permanently damaged. So in our country, in my practice, I've seen a lot of hypoglycemic brain injuries happening. Jaundice again, if the jaundice is very high, which goes up to the brain, then there is a problem. Birth trauma, a kind of Erb's palsy, cervical fracture. These are all the problems which are common in perinatal injury. In postnatal injury, again, brain infections or meningitis or encephalitis, stroke, trauma, any kind of brain trauma or otherwise. If there is a limb fracture or something and there is a malunion, again, the child can be disabled. Toxins, lead is important toxin, which we see. Pollution nowadays, air pollution, having a lot of high severity AQI, these all can lead to poor development in the child. Nutrition plays an important role. If the child doesn't eat well, has persistent anemia because of some kind, has thyroid issues, the child will have poor development in the future. Psychosocial is a like the poverty, the the emotional well-being which is not been given in the, especially in the villages when there are a lot of children and they are not been given a positive environment at home, then there can be problem. The social factors like being discrimination between a male and female child, so these all are, though that's a last in the list, but again is an important component which can lead to childhood disability. These are the MRI findings for the birth defects. So a birth problem like sugar, oxygen, prematurity can lead to multiple brain malformations, multiple brain affections, not malformations, affections. So having discussed the causes during the before the birth and the problems during the birth and after the birth, how can we prevent that? So what are the preventable components which we can, preventable steps which we can take during the whole pregnancy process? Prevention is a continuous process which can be divided into the stages of the disease, and it has the 3 steps. First thing is risk factors. Suppose we discuss the disablement process from starting to last. First is risk process. Then there is a subclinical stage when the disease is not over, disease is there, the disease process has begun, but it has not shown the signs and symptoms. That is the subclinical stage. Again is a clinical stage where you go to the doctor and doctor will advise that what is there. Then the child will have impairment, disability and handicap. So what can we do during this stage to prevent this disability to happen? That is the whole idea. So nowadays people are doing so much of, it's an emerging priority because we want to prevent it. So where can we do that? The steps first is here. That is a primary prevention. That is identifying at the level of risk factors. Suppose a mother or a family has a risk factor that they might develop some kind of problem in the future, then identification of them and monitoring those mothers. So monitoring high risk mothers again is a part of primary prevention, so that we want a normal healthy baby for that family. Secondary prevention is early detection. A child showing some early signs of a disease and the other child, suppose there are 2 children who are showing, one is showing a very early sign of the disease, subtle signs, the other one having a florid disease. So even if we give intervention, the same kind of intervention to both the children, the ultimate prognosis, the ultimate outcome will be good in the child who has just a subtle or a occult disease, and in the other child we are already very late. So before the bus goes, we have to actually board the bus. So that is early detection. Early detection is a part of secondary prevention and early intervention. That is the key to success. So we have been, with increasing awareness and with advancement of the science, we are able to pick up on the secondary prevention, but we are still lagging on this primary prevention. We need more awareness on how to have this primary prevention process happening. Tertiary prevention is when the child already has the disease and what can best be done for the ultimate outcome of the child. That is tertiary prevention. That is the rehabilitation part. How best you rehabilitate the child, the vocational training, the physical disability part, how best you go towards the physiotherapy or the other kind of modalities to decrease the handicap because of the disability, and then providing the opportunities equal to the other counterparts of the children. So, primary prevention. Genetic counseling I've written as a first point because that is a very important component and most of the families do not know about it. Suppose a family has a child who, suppose there was a history of abortion in the family. First child being aborted, either there is a missed abortion or some amount of anomalous baby or some problem in the baby because of which an abortion was advised. So those papers and those history are very crucial when you plan a second pregnancy because there are multiple factors which leads to the recurrence in the second pregnancy. So we should not just give away with that abortion. That single pregnancy which has taken a bad course will guide you to have a better outcome in the next pregnancy. So that should be taken very carefully and a genetic counseling should be taken so that we actually plan to have a normal baby for that family. So this part is missing. Most of the time what happens कि ऐसे ही कुछ हो गया होगा, first pregnancy some unfortunate events has happened and they just let go, and then the second child is born with some problems. So these problems should not be just handled very lightly and should be taken to a proper specialist and discussed that this is a thing which happened with that family and with the mother. So what next? And if a family has one child who has some amount of neurological problems or other defects, they should definitely go to a doctor to discuss that how can they have a normal baby. There are multiple tests available to pick up the diagnosis early and to tell you whether the next pregnancy, whether the upcoming child will have the issue or not. If the upcoming child has some issue which the doctors are able to diagnose before 20 weeks, they can offer you a solution to that so that you do not have a child who has disability. Premarital examination and pre-pregnancy planning. So this is also lagging in our country, that regular medical checkup of the woman of a childbearing age. A lady who has been in a childbearing age and can conceive anytime, their medical conditions should be well known, their health related conditions. Most of the time, the heart disease of the mother gets undiagnosed. And when they are actually becoming pregnant, the demand increases of the body. The demand of the body increases. Then they are able to know that these are the problems the child has. The mother has some heart disease, some rheumatoid heart disease or something else. So these are the problems which can be screened early of a mother of a lady of a childbearing age group. The RH factor, a mother having a negative blood group or a O blood group can have a child who has high amount of bilirubin in the postnatal period. So again, this blood group, having known your blood group is very important because then you can give some amount of injection in that 9-month period so that the child doesn't develop this RH factor isoimmunization and child will not have the adverse effect of jaundice. The infections in the mother. I spoke about the torch infections, the regular immunization, whether the mother has received the rubella vaccination or not. So all these, while the mother who has not conceived, or the healthy lady, the healthy baby, the mother who has conceived, the whole 9 months is very important. And regular prenatal care is an important crux to have a child without disability. So peri-conceptional folic acid is again important. A married lady who has thought that they might conceive within next 6 months, or they are actually planning to have a family further, so they can start taking folic acid. That's a standard practice overall to prevent the neural tube defects because folic acid is required for your neural tissues. So if a mother is folic acid deficient, the child might have neural tube defect. So prenatal care, natal care, and the postnatal care. Environmental pollutions, yes, the mother who has conceived should be away from the pollution, should try to reduce the amount of air pollution exposure, and should reduce the alcohol consumption, the unnecessary drug consumption, because any amount of this can have a teratogenic effect on the child. Teratogenic effect is having a kind of birth defect. The effect of all these toxins, the pollution or drugs, in the formation, during the formation of the child, if the drug can act, can lead to a teratogenic effect. Antenatal ultrasounds are important. Level 1 and level 2, they are particular set that in these weeks these ultrasounds will be done so that they pick up the abnormality early. And it's very important to get it in detail done in a good center so that you avoid all these effects happening. Genetic test. If the mother has an advanced stage, nowadays there are a lot of genetic tests available which will at least reduce the risk of having a common disorders like the Down syndrome, the chromosomal disorders, and there are multiple other micro deletions and all which we are able to pick up during those 9 months period. So ultrasounds, the genetic tests which are available, we should actually avail that. Diet is important because this is a very recent paper. I haven't put a legend here. Pharmacology 2019, which shows that magnesium, how it is important in a child, creatine, how it is important. These are the micronutrients which are important for a developing baby. And other than the routine ones, the iron, the iodine, the other routine ones are important, but these are the rare ones. That is why I put this slide which shows that multiple micronutrients are important. That is the important of having a balanced diet during the pregnancy. The diet, the other micronutrients, the rest which a mother needs. So that will all lead to a child who is very healthy, and a child who is a very fruitful for the society. Immunization program. This is a program for the child. That's a postnatal part. A child who's a healthy child and should get all the routine vaccinations like the pneumococcal one, the polio, the DPT. Pneumococcal ones are the recent ones which will prevent from the brain infections happening, from the pneumonias happening. So that will again prevent from the severe disease in the infant, in the developing age group. So if these vaccines are available and a family can afford it, they should definitely go for these vaccines. In childhood, the nutrition of the child is important because if the child, after the child is born, the child is having an anemia, and the child is having other kind of micronutrient deficiency, child will not be able to grow to the full potential. The care of the child, the positive environment, the stimulating environment of the family is important for the proper nurturing of the child. The intellectual functioning of the child, the behavior of the child is also driven by the environmental factors other than the genetic factors. So these factors at least are modifiable, and we can do something in these environmental factors to ensure that the child develops fully. What about secondary prevention? So newborn screening is a part on that. If a child is born, we should do a regular newborn screening to find out the basic defects that the child can have. They are the set rule here, and I think most of the hospitals get this newborn screening done. Thyroid is a norm everywhere. On day 3, we usually take a thyroid sample so that we do not miss hypothyroidism in the child. The blood sugar is important. Suppose the child is born low birth weight or small for gestational age, we do a regular blood sugar screening so that we don't miss out on hypoglycemia. So this is early detection. We are trying to detect early so that we prevent it and we do not lead the disability to happen. Screening or surveillance of the child's development. Um, See, going to doctor for a regular vaccination is important, not only for just vaccination, it is for the regular surveillance of the child. A doctor who sees, a pediatrician who sees a child during immunization screens for the development, overall development of the child, the behavior of the child. So they are able to pick up early and they are able to tell you that, yes, you should go for further evaluation. So early detection, again, the regular screening and surveillance with a proper healthcare at a proper healthcare facility is important. Screening for vision and hearing is important these days, and we have a lot of tests available. Suppose a mother feels that the child is not able to hear properly, and it's a kind of pretends to deaf. Sorry, child pretends to deaf. Child is not able to listen. Child doesn't pay any attention to them, so they can go for this vision and hearing evaluation. Follow up of the high risk newborns. Suppose a newborn had some untoward events during the immediate neonatal period, and the child is otherwise well, child has been discharged from the nursery, but that child needs extra care, extra frequent and regular follow-up visits with the doctor so that they are able to pick up any sign of neurological dysfunction or other disabilities in future. So detecting early in a child who is a high risk newborn. Tertiary prevention is here the actually the disease has already taken its full potential, and what do we do now? What we are doing at the hospitals is the tertiary prevention. Early detection is before the disease has already happened. So at this point, when the child has already had a disease, we can just optimize and maximize the child's potential. If the child has some physical disability, we'll try to decrease the improve the posture, the tone, maybe advise some kind of orthopedic support to them, so that a child is able to at least ambulate, child is able to do their maximum ability, like activities of daily living, and maybe in their schooling also, depending upon the disability the child has. And the other aspect is improving the quality of life. Suppose we know that the child doesn't have a full potential, but it is very important to improve the quality of life of the child and the family as well. So I'm seeing a lot of patients who are non-ambulatory cerebral palsy child. Does it mean that the child doesn't need any treatment? No, it doesn't mean that the child doesn't need any treatment. It means that the life of the child, the quality of life should be improved. The child should not have a lot of pain. Child should be able to sleep. Child should be able to eat and able to participate in the activities or cooperate in the activities which a family wants. So quality of life is a very important term, and we should always as a doctor and as a family try to improve it so that the life is at least peaceful. To reduce the burden on the family and caregivers, to encourage the full integration of the disabled individuals in society. These are the individuals. Suppose the child of there's a child of cerebral palsy, but her IQ or his or her IQ is absolutely normal. So that child should be placed in school for the proper inclusive education. Just because of the physical disability, child should not be barred from going to the school. So full integration, giving them the full potential to develop as a normal individual. So this is the tertiary prevention. So yeah, this is my slide. So speaking about to summarize, we spoke about the causes. The very important cause was a prenatal cause before pregnancy. That was the maximum part, and during pregnancy it's the least. During pregnancy and after the pregnancy forms a lower chunk. And what about the prevention? The regular antenatal checkups. High risk mothers, high risk newborns should be regularly screened, and once the child has already had it, we should always try to optimize their functional outcome to to help the child to perform the best which a child can do. So that is all. With these comments, I'll just stop my presentation, and I'm happy to take any question.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Rajni. Indeed a very informative session. Right. I'll like to read out some of the questions that we have, and I'll also open it for everyone else to drop in or maybe raise their hand if you want to have a direct interaction with Dr. Rajni. We have a couple of questions. I think parents are here who they want to understand the reasons behind autism, you know. So if you could just throw some light on that, I think it's one of the most sought after questions when parents are concerned about. Also to do with, there is a question on, if the child is having with seizures or without seizures and what exactly is the prognosis, what exactly is the future that they can look out. So if you could address this question for us.
So thank you, Sucheta, for the question. There are two parts of the question. One is epilepsy related and one is autism related. So let us first cover the autism part. See, autism, to find out proper etiology for the autism, it's very difficult. What we counsel in our OPD is that 30 to 40% of the children will be able to find out a genetic etiology. Even if we do all the investigations which are available, the tier 1, the tier 2, as per the norms, if we do perform all the genetic tests, then also we'll be able to fix up only in 30 to 40% maximum. The major chunk is idiopathic. We still do not know, and it is still an evolving branch that we do not know that why these kids are having it. It's not only the genetic factors, there are multiple environmental factors are also related, and birth related factors are also being kind of no associations are trying to made with it, but no absolute etiological factors are able to point it that this is the cause or this is the cause. Like one or two factors one I have showed is a Fragile X syndrome.
Right.
Autistic features are common in them. Down syndrome autistic features can be common if the child has some amount of hypoxic injury in the child will might have an autistic feature. So these are the major chunks in which the obvious findings are there in the antenatal period and even in the birth. So that is only the 40% of the part. The rest major part we are still not able to know that what is the etiology.
Right. And I
Usually
think
the aggressive workup is done
hmm,
when the family has the first child having autism. Suppose we are able to fix up the diagnosis in that child, at least we'll prevent the second child having it. So
right.
that is our whole idea in the OPT, that we counsel the family that we go with all the genetic tests which are available in the first child of the family.
All right. And I think my 2 cents to the parents who are asking about what made it happen, I think it's important to look how we can now rehabilitate the child, how
Right,
we can
right.
look at in terms of providing intervention than trying to worry about and find fault. You did not do anything wrong as a parent. It had to happen, so it happened, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's a
Coming
very
back.
important message, because don't look back that what has happened. So looking back will not give you any idea. So the whole idea is to go forward and to rehabilitate this child. What about see about epilepsy, the second part of the question? If a child has cerebral palsy, suppose I take an example, and a child has seizures, and if those seizures are difficult to control, there are two terms when we discuss about epilepsy: is a controlled epilepsy with a drug, and other is a drug resistant epilepsy. Drug resistant epilepsy is whenever we give two drugs and the child's seizures are not getting controlled. So child require a higher amount of dosage and more number of drugs to control his seizures. A child who has cerebral palsy with epilepsy in which it is controlled with drugs, then the potential can be the same as the child without epilepsy. So controlled epilepsy is as good as a child having no epilepsy. And if the child has drug resistant epilepsy, we have number of epilepsy syndromes like a West syndrome, Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, or that there are multiple other syndromes. If the child has one of those kind of resistant epilepsy syndromes, then the prognosis is not very good, because controlling seizures to zero will be a difficult thing. So resistant epilepsy is obviously a bad thing in terms of prognosis, if you ask me.
All right. We have a similar question from Pramarth who wants to know, is it true that a 5-month fetus can get seizures inside the womb?
Yeah, very important. So seizures inside the womb can be seen in multiple vitamin responsive epilepsies, which say like pyridoxine, that's a B6. It's a vitamin B, one of the vitamin B component. If there is a deficiency while the child is growing, the child can throw seizures inside the womb. And how will the mother know? The child will have excessive fetal movements. The fetal movement, if the mother has some experience in the first pregnancy and this is the second child, the mother will be able to know that the this बच्चा extra घूमता है. So extra घूमना या extra kick मारना बच्चे का, that can also be abnormal. They can report to the doctor so that they understand that what is happening. If along with the child has fetal distress, जैसे बच्चे का वो चेकअप करते हैं and they know that कि बच्चे की हार्ट रेट ज्यादा हो रही है, कम हो रही है, बच्चे को कुछ डिस्ट्रेस हो रहा है, then that can be abnormal. So there are multiple reasons to that. One most common is a vitamin responsive epilepsies. So there are epilepsies which are having when the child is still inside the womb. And the other way around, अगर बच्चा कम घूमता है, this is extra घूमने वाला बच्चा, कम घूमता है मतलब the mother is not able to feel the fetal movements as a normal, so, as a normal mother. So that means बच्चे के मोटर सिस्टम में प्रॉब्लम है, मसल्स में या नर्व्स में प्रॉब्लम है, जिसकी वजह से बच्चा हाथ पांव कम मार रहा है, बच्चा सुस्त है, ढीला है. So that also indication we can get when the child is still inside the mother. So excessive is also abnormal and low is also abnormal. So there are different conditions which pertains or which leads to this.
All right. We have another question from George Sandhu who wants to know a little bit about clubfoot. Can
So
I know about clubfoot? So maybe, yeah.
सो क्लैपफुट सी एंटीनाटली भी डायग्नोज किया जा सकता है. अगर बहुत सिवियर है तो एंटीनाटली यूजुअली दे आर एबल टू पिक अप, एंड इफ इट इज नॉट वेरी सिवियर देन yes, of course, postnatally you will be able to know. And nowadays there are a lot of pediatric orthopedicians, we are able to fix up very beautifully to them. Regular plasters and minor tenotomy या कुछ सर्जिकल प्रोसीजर करके they are able to correct that deformity. So clubfoot, yes, can be due to multiple reasons, that is neurogenic or non-neurogenic, and can be known when the child is still inside. तो अल्ट्रासाउंड से भी पता लगाया जा सकता है. कुछ अगर केसेस जो बहुत माइन्यूट होते हैं वो मिस भी होते हैं, then they are able to detect after the birth.
Himanshi wants to know that can screen time trigger autism?
So very debatable question, Manshi. So screen time, of course, is a bad thing these days. Looking at this lockdown situation, also in multiple factors, not just autism, in all the other neurological problems, also a child who has suppose epilepsy, isolated epilepsy, no behavioral problems, no IQ problems, that those children are also having lot of issues with the screen time. So screen time, yes, beyond a certain norm which is prescribed, is abnormal. So since it is unavoidable, we do say that you try to restrict as much as possible, do only the basic parts and not the rest of it. It will not increase the propensity of having autism. If a child has already has autism and is on screen, then his potency or his potential will be different than a child who doesn't have a that much of screen time. So it will not lead to autism, but yes, the results might differ. Results of intervention.
Right, and there are also a lot of research studies coming in that children who have excessive amount of screen time exposure are somewhere mimicking autistic features, but are
Yeah,
not necessarily have a diagnosis of autism. So the
right.
moment you reduce the screen time, the features are likely features are going to go away. Right. Okay. So again, we have question from Sarla who wants to know, my child is autistic and can it be a possibility to overcome from autism with the help of speech, occupational and physical therapist? We had a similar question on in terms of asking about what should be the intervention strategy.
So intervention
If you would like.
strategy should be multidisciplinary. I think say it is individualized therapy for the individual child. No two autistic children will be the same. A child might have a sensory issue which is more predominant in the child. The other child might have a speech issue which is more predominant. So not all children are non-verbal. So there are different problems in different autistic children, and a therapist will always target that individual child, what is required for that child, and that therapy plan will also change from time to time. So it is a multidisciplinary approach where the occupational therapist, the special educators, and the sensory integration will work. So that's what I can see. And overcome autism, see, autism is a, its natural course is like it will improve with time with your therapies. So it will not totally go away. With time the problems might change, some problems might come as a new findings, some might problems might go. So as the child develops and you keep on doing your interventions, child will child might become near normal, like they can go to normal school, they can do all their functions, and independent function can also be expected. So that is what I think we can discuss about overcoming the disease.
Right. And we have a question on what is the role of autoimmunity in mothers like ankylosing spondylitis?
Hmm. So, ankylosing spondylitis is a seronegative this arthritis problems in the mother. If the mother is on some drug because of that, because there are a lot of suppressants which are given for that problem. If the mother is on some immunosuppression during that pregnancy time, that might lead to some problems in the child. So they have to discuss with the doctor that whether I can continue this drug or not. And if I have to continue this drug, then what are the consequences of that? So that is what I think we can discuss about overcoming the disease.
So I think there is some issue with her video. So we'll wait on for a 2 seconds. The others who want to ask questions, may please raise your hand. We'll take questions for another 5-7 minutes, and then we'll try to close the program. And if you have any further questions, you can leave them on the comments below, and we'll have somebody from our team get in touch with you to answer those questions. Right? Okay. We'll just give it another 2 minutes for her to join back. So, Bhavika, your question is how do we do early intervention for a 1.5-month-old baby whose doctor said that will be a special child due to severe asphyxia? I think the first intervention that we'd like to suggest for your child would be occupational therapy. So if you could get in touch with my team, leave your number. We'll have somebody get in touch with you, an occupational therapist from the team, so that they can tell you exactly how early intervention is going to support you. But I would strongly suggest that you go ahead and do that. Right. Okay, Dr. Rajni, you're back, but you're on mute. So if you could unmute yourself.
Hi. Sorry
Yeah.
for the bad connection.
So I just joined with my phone while
Yeah, all right.
working. So I was asking, answering that question about autism. We completed that question. No, how do we overcome? Next question was mm,
The next question was on s- spondylitis.
ankylosing, yeah,
Yes.
ankylosing spondylitis. So I was discussing that if the mother is on some drug, then we need to check those drugs. And just because of that disease, child will have some issues. It's not about that survival is not an issue, but child having ankylosing spondylitis in later onset of life, that might be there because it has a genetic component. So child might have that problem in the later half of the life.
Right. So let's take some participants coming online. So if anybody who's raising their hand and, Jalaj, if you could unmute them.
I think I can see 5 6
Yes,
releases.
ma'am, I'm unmuting to Ashwani.
Okay. Hi, Ashwini. Could you please ask your question?
Hi, Ashwani, you are unmute. Please ask your question. Ashwani, are you audible? Okay, one more participant has raised the hand, Nazir.
Yeah.
Nazir, now you are unmute. Please ask your question. If you have any query, please ask.
Hi, Nazir. Can you hear us? Would you like to ask your question, please? So
I
in the
think
yeah,
they have some technical issue, so
yeah.
he's unable to
So Mukta
unmute.
wants to know, is there a genetic therapy or medicine for microdeletion of some of the genes in a child? Dr.
So
Rajni?
that is very specific. To my knowledge, that is not still available. Gene therapy is still being explored for specific microdeletion. Still, I'm not aware that any gene therapy kind of thing is coming up. But yes, it is being explored in multiple diseases, in multiple hereditary neuropathies also, and in multiple other diseases as well, non-neurological. It's being tried on, but I'm not aware of any such kind of thing for microdeletions.
And the role of
And
stem,
microdeletions it's a chromosomal disorder basically.
right?
Has a chromosomal disorder. Gene therapy will be able to help those children.
All right. Okay. Ram Modi wants to know. Okay, sorry. We have Dr. Priyanka who wants to understand the role of stem cells in this case, and how it can help.
In case of autism or cerebral palsy,
I think so, she's not mentioned it, but if you could touch
but
upon
in
it. Yeah.
neurological. Stem cell therapy is a very upcoming therapy, and people have been trying it. When I was at AIMS, there was a project going on, and it is still going on about the role of stem cell therapy in cerebral palsy. As of now, it's not come up as a recommendation, but we just say to the parents that it is still upcoming and it is experimental. We don't advise stem cell therapy upfront. Currently for autism also and also for cerebral palsy.
Right. Shiv, do we
So
have?
we need to wait for some time to have the final results.
All right. Shiv, do we have anybody who'd like to come on board and ask questions?
Manjula Shukla has a question, so I'll be unmuting her now.
Right. Hi, Manjula.
Hello, ma'am. Namaste.
Namaste. Please, अपना
Um,
question पूछिए.
ma'am, I was the parent of the autistic child,
Okay.
and I had been done the stem cell when my son was 7 years old, and 3 times already I've been done the stem cell in Pune Noble Hospital from Dr. Arun Mukherjee. Now he's no more. And I started HBOT and Ambitol injection, and he was in GFCF diet, and stem cell procedure was going on 3 times with my son, and my son was the first child from the India with whom done the, you can say my son was in trial. Then later on the stem cell has been already started, and I think more 3000 kids is already going on under procedure with the stem cell. And I have a video before and after. I'm just sharing my personal experience. Now I have no more my son. I have lost my child in some road accident. Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yeah, I'm able to hear you. Please share. Please
So
continue.
I just want to share behalf of the stem cell and HBOT and brain spec scan and Embitol injections and with the therapy with the complete goal I had been enrolled for my son. So ma'am, it is after stem cell my son improved a lot in academic, in communication, and he achieved too much in academic area, and the communicative skills was also improved after stem cell. And the first stem cell was done when he was 7, the second when he was 8, and the third when he was 10 years old. And I lost him in a road accident when he was 13 years old. So all these three procedure and ambitral injection, so my son has improved a lot with all the therapy, with all the treatment.
Okay.
Ji, ma'am. So this is
Hello.
my this is
This
my
is
personal
Mrs. Manjula, this is very nice to hear about the experience of the stem cell therapy. See,
experience.
with when you do a stem cell therapy, you continue all your therapies as well.
Yes,
Your
yes, it's very important. It's very important. And the ma'am, the role is the diet role is important. The therapy is important, and like the HBOT and the stem cell, the therapies, the medicine, the treatment, whatever I have planned for my son, ma'am, he is improved. I mean, tremendous improvement after the therapies, the
so
treatment. The
that's what I'm
treatment,
telling. See,
ji.
when you do a stem cell therapy and you continue all your therapies, you're almost on, like head to
Yes,
toe, you're full day with the child. So
yes,
that child is bound to improve,
yes, ma'am.
not just with stem cell therapy, with other your supportive measures as well. So
Yes,
still that stem cell therapy role, to say that stem cell therapy actually has worked, it is very difficult to find out in scientific experiments. That is what trial is going on, that
yes.
whether stem cell therapy in isolation can
We
cause any
can't.
improvement.
Yes, ma'am. I
Otherwise, if when you do a stem cell therapy, you have spent a lot and then already you're
yes,
on with
yes,
your therapies. So
yes.
that is why this full potential you are able to see.
I totally understand. We can't cure, but at least we can reform. We can't cure completely, but the child can improve.
Okay.
Right. Thank you so much, Manjula, for sharing your experience, and we're very sorry for your loss.
Thank you
Uh,
so much.
right. Jalaj, could you unmute someone else who would like to ask a question?
Yeah, ma'am, sure. Uh, Bisma Rasool wants to ask a question. I'll be unmuting.
Yeah.
Bisma, you can ask your question now.
Hi, Bisma, could you hear us? Can you hear us? Please ask your question.
Ma'am, I think due to some technical difficulty, she is not able
Right.
to.
Okay, right. So I think I'll take one last question, Dr. Rajni. I'm sure you are also, we're way over the time. Vinita wants to know about common screening tests during the prenatal phase. If you could just take that, and then we'll wind up the session.
Okay, fine. See, this domain prenatal investigations, it comprises of multiple parts, blood investigations, ultrasounds, and the special genetic test as well. So routine investigations which a gynecologist does is about your hemoglobin level, your iodine level, your thyroid profile, your other infection profile like the torch infections, HIV, HBS. That is done usually in the first trimester. These are normal things which which all mothers undergo during the antenatal test. Then there are the two ultrasounds which they do at the level 1 and the level 2. This is again is a in the gynae domain, which they are able to figure out some congenital anomalies in that. So I'll tell you my personal experience. I saw a recent child, a very good family, having a child with neural tube defect. The level 2 ultrasound was also done, and of course, maybe that is a, I don't know about the center and all, but that neural tube defect was missed. It was a big neural tube defect that was, there are cases which are missed. So empowering our doctors, having our doctors to the full expertise doing the level 1 and level 2 scan is very important. Level 2 especially, because we as a doctors advise you abortion or MTP, that is medical termination of pregnancy, only before 20 weeks. So that level 2 scan is important, which will advise you that the child will have some congenital anomalies. If the child has some congenital anomaly, then the doctor might offer you the amniocentesis test or the other test, other genetic test to find out the DNA of the child for the genetic investigations. Amniocentesis basically is to take out the water from the amniotic fluid where there are free DNA available. So you take out the DNA material of the fetus, you examine that, and then you're able to know that these are the certain genetic investigations which are performed on that particular sample. For the Down syndrome, for trisomy, basically all the chromosomal disorders are being screened on that. So that is one thing which is actually improving. At least in metro cities in Delhi, I've seen a lot this amniocentesis thing happening. And the other thing is chorionic villi sampling, that is CVS. If a family has one child who already has a genetic disorder, let's say sickle cell disease or thalassemia, these both are blood disorders. The child has problems in having a particular amount of hemoglobin because of that problem. So if the child has a known genetic disease in a previous child, then what you do is chorionic villi sampling between 9 to 12 weeks. 9 to 10 weeks, of course, that's the time. They, with that chorion, they are able to take out the DNA and they'll perform the same genetic test for these genetic disorders, and they're able to know whether this fetus is still affected or not. If the current fetus is also affected, then we advise abortion for that family, so that you should go for the multiple medical termination of pregnancy and you do not advance your pregnancy. So that is one thing, so that the family will have only a healthy baby and not a diseased baby. That's the role of chorionic villi sampling and amniocentesis. Nowadays, for a high-risk mothers who are more than 35 years of age, there is a NIPT test, that is non-invasive genetic test, parental testing, NIPT test, in which they are able to figure out all the genetic chromosomes and even the micro deletions also, the sex chromosome problems, at least 3 major problems, and other than that, some micro deletions also they're able to figure out. So that test is also available, and doctors usually advise for mothers who are more than 35 years of age. So in all probability, with a good amount of ultrasound, with these kind of genetic investigations, you are able to at least have a source of assurance that the child will be normal. Still, the child will might have some unavoidable detectable genetic problems which might appear. See, we can't detect all the genetic conditions when the child is still inside inside the mother's womb. But yes, to maximum extent, what is available today is we will be able to avoid it. So ultrasound.
Right. Thank you so much. I think we have a lot of a huge line waiting to ask you more questions, but we're really short of time. And I'd like to apologize to everyone for that. We can probably have you another time, with us again to be able to answer these questions. Right. Thank you so much for the audience and thank you for coming in and, spending so much time. Again, an apology for all of us we could not attend to. Right. We're really short of time and there is some problem, technical issue that, we can't letting anybody speak when they are uh, trying to converse with us. But thank you so much, Dr. Rajni. It was wonderful having you here. Right? Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
For anybody who has any questions, please drop in your questions, contact details. We will have somebody from the team get in touch with you to respond to you. Right? Thank you so much, Dr. Rajni.
Okay, thank you.